yeah, this is another
Billion Cal-
crazy part about this as well. One billionaire couple owns almost all the water in California. In 1994, the Resnick secretly seized control of California's public water supply. Now their companies use 150 billion gallons every year while working class people suffer under drought conditions.
Californians suffer through unprecedented drought.
Oh, damn, a second thought. Let's watch this. The billionaires who own your water.
Billionaire couple owns a massive share of the state's water system, seized in a series of secretive meetings 2 decades ago. That system was largely paid for by the very taxpayers whose water these billionaires hold hostage.
They're suggesting you're concerned primarily with your house, even though you're not remotely acted or said as such. Your chat is something. I think that there's a lot of rugged cynicism that comes along with constantly seeing really unfair class dynamics at play. So oftentimes that cynicism, it turns into people making silly takes like this, making silly statements like this.
Urban water systems are desperate for water, but in 2023, they'll receive just 5% of what they requested from the state. The Resnicks are the biggest farmers in California. As of 2007, they owned 4 San Francisco's worth of farmland. And nearly half of Americans buy at least one of their products. Their pistachios, their pomegranate juice, their mandarins, their flowers. It's all under one massive umbrella, the Wonderful Company. A privately owned company worth at least $5 billion.
Excuse me, they're named the Wonderful Company, so obviously it can't be a horrifying dystopia. Like, they're not named the Evil Company. Duh.
Majority owners, the Resnicks, are worth at least $8 billion. How were they able to take over such a large percentage of what should be a shared public resource? This is The Classroom from More Perfect Union, and today we're looking at how the Resnicks got rich. Linda is a former child actress, the daughter of Jack Harris, a successful movie distributor of the 1950s, most well known for The Blob.
Starring Steve McQueen and a cast of exciting young people.
At 19, she founded her own advertising agency. Stewart was born to a middle-class New Jersey family and started his first business, a janitorial service, in grad school. He eventually acquired American Protection Services, a burglar alarm and security company. Linda approached him about marketing services for the company, and they hit it off, not knowing that one day they'd work together to take over California's water. The lovebirds became business partners. They bought Teleflora, the flower delivery company, and the Franklin Mint, purveyors of inane little tchotchkes. Linda was the marketing person, and Stewart was in charge of business. As Linda told the LA Times in 1993, "I've always said that Stewart and I together make one perfect person, like little salt and pepper shakers." In the late 80s, they found their primary...
As of now, by the way, the Santa Monica areas that were up for possible evacuation have been elevated to mandatory evacuation, and the possible evacuation zone has increased. Just so you know, it is now all the way up to Wilshire Boulevard. If you are living in the, if you're living anywhere near Santa Monica, okay, if you're living anywhere near Santa Monica, all the way up to Wilshire Boulevard, you are now in the potential evacuation zone. If you're living past Montana Avenue, you are now in the mandatory evacuation zone. Just wait, a private firefighting company is going to pop up and pull a crisis and make a ton of money. Yeah. The app I'm using for this is Watch Duty. What is mandatory evacuation? No, this isn't like near UCLA. This is Santa Monica. UCLA is in West LA. UCLA is in Westwood, which is past the 405. It seems as though the Eaton fire might have expanded their evacuation zones as well. Pasadena, damn near the entirety of Pasadena is now, or at least like half of Pasadena is now in potential evacuation, past the point of the 210.
industry, agriculture. They got into the pistachio business. Linda said, "We've done more for the pistachio than anyone ever since it was planted in the Garden of Eden. My husband should be canonized for all the work he's done." They started branching into other products: almonds, pomegranates, citrus, wine, and acquiring more and more land to cover it, including some very important land in Kern County, which granted them water rights in the area. As the Resnicks were building their empire, the state of California was building new water infrastructure with taxpayer money. California's natural water supply is very inconsistent. Vastly differing amounts of rainfall means the state can go from surplus to drought and back very easily.
Here, I'll show you on Watch Duty. Okay. This area was previously designated as a potential evacuation zone. It is now in mandatory evacuation. This area that was not previously designated as a potential evacuation zone is now designated as a potential evacuation zone. These are very densely packed areas, okay? This is literally downtown Santa Monica. Like, this is Wilshire. Like, there's a hospital there. UCLA Hospital is like right around here somewhere. Yeah, UCLA Medical Center is right here. Which means the fire is not, they're not able to contain it, which means that it's like starting to move in here as well. Okay. This massive chunk is where I live, okay? And is where a lot of people live. Like I said, we are surrounded 3 parts by different fires. Luckily, so far, the winds have been blowing in this distance. Okay? The winds have been blowing in this distance. USC is like down here. This is where downtown Los Angeles is. And this is Pasadena. Okay? Pasadena split in half this way. Anything north of the 210 is now officially a part of the potential evacuation zone. And the mandatory evacuation zones have increased as well. Unironically, when we do call it to bounce to get ahead of the insane traffic, no time soon. Like, there's a lot of distance between myself and all of this. If these areas, like if the fire somehow moves into the hills, if the Woodley fire somehow moves across, because this is where Sherman Oaks and Encino and Tarzana, like this is the valley. A lot of people live in the valley. Okay. There is a mountain that is separating all of this from all of this. You see? Okay. The hills. The hills basically separate all of that. If somehow the wind shifted its direction and started carrying the fire instead of away from the greater Los Angeles metropolitan area and moved it in the direction of the greater Los Angeles metropolitan area, all hell would break loose in general. And also, that's when I would have to evacuate as well. Update from the Times. More than 1.5 million electricity customers in California were without power on Wednesday afternoon, the majority in the Los Angeles area. Some of the cutoffs were deliberate. Southern California Edison shut off power to more than 170,000 of its customers to prevent electrical equipment from causing more wildfires. And San Diego Gas and Electric also cut power to about 9,000 customers in the area. Yeah. Okay, Saul. Why not leave before it's too late? What do you mean, why not leave before it's too late? I mean, if everybody operated with that mentality, we would straight up, we would cause virtually everything to collapse. You know? That's a looter. Yeah. Would you keep streaming if you had to evacuate? Probably. That's why. Why is there a designation, you think, for mandatory and potential evacuation zones? Also, that was a joke. That chatter being a looter is a joke. Please don't take that seriously. Okay? I know you're covering something else. If you don't mind immigration stuff, yeah, we'll do some ICE stuff as well. Here's Walter Masterson talking about Wes Nichols. Wes Nichols is a billionaire that supports cutting every social service in California, but now he's mad the fire department doesn't have enough money. I just left the formerly hellscape, formerly known as Pacific Palisades, where I've lived for 26 years. I'm mad at what I saw. Our politicians have failed us, unprepared, unimaginative, understaffed, and now overwhelmed. Heads must roll for this disaster. I personally saw 100 plus homes fully engulfed. Rick Caruso, LA just mentioned water wasn't working in the fire hydrants. What the F? I took this video on Pali High, total destruction. These people demanded, these people don't want to pay extra taxes. They lose their minds if any of that goes to the appropriate resources, like infrastructure hardening and the like. They want to cut the existing property taxes, and then they turn around and go, how could this have happened? Oh, man, heads should roll. It's like, yeah, man, heads should roll. Maybe, you know, the heads of the people most responsible for the lack of organization surrounding infrastructure hardening, the lack of interest in taking preventative measures. Like, kind of weird. Kind of weird. What is this? I cannot. What? The remains of Pacific Palisades will get picked clean tonight? Is this a real photo or AI? Grok, ... for now. I cannot imagine how enraging and utterly despicable it is to see people spreading AI-generated images of LA fires when everyone around you is terrified, devastated, and trying to find accurate information to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. Meanwhile, that AI, in order to power the machines that spit out this idiotic image, you're accelerating the conditions in which, you know, climate change worsens. Anyway, one of the examples that I wanted to point to in terms of like our funding priorities is the fiscal year 2024 budget increases and decreases that Mayor Karen Bass made. Now, of course, the overall budget is massive. It's like $800 million spent on the collective total of like firefighting initiatives in the city and state. Having said that, however, it is still important to recognize that. Oof. That was crazy. I just heard a crazy wind blowing something over. It's still important to recognize that the Los Angeles, the Los Angeles budgets were changed in this past fiscal year. Karen Bass made some changes to the LA budgets this past year. She cut the fire department by $23 million while increasing the police department budget by $138 million. Many of that was following the notes, the demands made by those very same wealthy people who are now complaining. Okay? Just so you understand. Now, of course, 23 million is marginal. But I think it is more damning when you consider what the budget priorities look like. Here's the City of LA fiscal year 2024-2025 department operational budget increases and decreases. The police got $126 extra million. Down here, you notice that the fire department lost $17.6 million. Sanitation, 15 million. General services, 14 million. Street services, 21 million. The fire department was the second. The fire department got cut the second hardest. Okay? Just so you understand what our spending priorities look like here in this big old city. LA Times editorial telling you like it is. As I said before, we're not in a recession. This is not COVID. This is a budget deficit we have made here in City Hall. The Los Angeles Times editorial board wrote, LA is broke and the budget crisis is self-inflicted. A year ago, the reserve fund was at a 60. The California Reserve Fund as well, but the LA City Reserve Fund was at $648 million. Higher labor costs, starting with a $1 billion raise for LAPD over 4 years. Record level liability payouts and lower revenues that fell short of $222 million caused the reserve fund threshold to collapse. Just remember, so much of the money goes to the police, both directly funding their salaries, overtime, and all of their newest weapons, all of their newest gear. Okay? But outside of that, it also goes to liability payouts when they end up, not really doing their jobs, or when they are doing something, doing a piss poor job that ends up harming someone randomly. Okay? Just something to consider. Anyway, here's how, going back to the story that I was looking at of how the entirety of the water of the state of California was privatized.
They build water banks to store water during surpluses to have during droughts. One important storage facility is the Curran Water Bank, started in 1988. The facility was built with hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, which could have been a good thing. The people of California would have owned the water. But there were two Californians thirstier than the rest, and they wanted more water. Linda and Stuart Resnick, and they had a lot of political power. We'll get to that. In 1994, state water officials, water infrastructure contractors, and agricultural landowners with water rights arranged a secretive meeting at a resort in Monterey Bay, California. These groups, a mix of private companies and public agencies, rewrote California's water rules without any input from voters, taxpayers, or legislators. The new rules, called the Monterey Plus Agreement or the Monterey Amendments, were devastating for working Californians, and great for agriculture billionaires. The original code included urban preference, a long-standing rule that in times of drought, the state water board would give urban areas, where people live, access to water supplies before agricultural interests. Monterey axed that. That means that in times of drought, the water systems for normal Californians would have to buy water from private companies, because they weren't getting it from the state. The new agreement also loosened regulations on paper water. That's water that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere but on paper. The full quantities of water that providers could have, but don't actually need to have. Today, 5 times as much water has been promised and sold as actually exists. And importantly, the meeting changed ownership of the Curran Water Bank. What once belonged to the state was transferred to a few private water contractors, one of which was Westside Mutual, a wholly owned subsidiary of Wonderful Foods. The wonderful employee who runs Westside, Bill Phillimore, is the chairman of the public organization that manages the Curran Water Bank. Boom. One secret meeting, and the Resnicks owned nearly 60% of an important California water resource, built with hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money. The new ownership, combined with the rules on paper and surplus water, meant that during times of drought, the Resnicks could sell Kern water back to the state water systems. They took Californian taxpayers' water and sold it back to them, both literally as the water.
Okay, but that probably generates a lot of profits. So you really got to think about that.
Supply, and also to grow expensive food like gourmet pistachios and pomegranate juice. They converted the people's water into products many can't afford. And that's just one water bank. The Resnicks also have control of other water boards and have been sued for directing more water towards their properties. So how do they get away with this Chinatown-level chicanery?
Gonna be a lot of irate citizens when they find out that they're paying for water that they're not gonna get.
With philanthropy. The Resnicks donate millions of dollars to politicians and research institutions, which help them secure control over water systems, and even get more water and more taxpayer funding. One important project is the proposed California Delta Tunnel, a taxpayer-funded project which would send water from Northern California to Central, where the Resnicks farms are. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on state and federal legislation and politicians who support the tunnel project. But their favorite politician is Senator Dianne Feinstein.
You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway.
Chair of the Energy and Water Subcommittee. She's a close personal friend of the Resnicks,
Well, now she's
attending their
dead.
holiday parties in Aspen and maintaining their financial interests. A quick look through the bills she's sponsored shows several which would direct money to Kern-adjacent water projects. The Resnicks even ask her for things directly. When a pesky study about endangering salmon and shad fisheries threatened the Delta Tunnel, Stewart wrote a letter to Feinstein demanding a new study. She immediately forwarded it to the Obama administration, who agreed to spend $750,000 on a new study. It returned the same results as the first one. Can't buy science. But the Resnicks have tried. They are among the top donors to the University of California system, with their donations focusing on agricultural and ecological studies. The Resnicks have basically bought entire departments who put out studies on how water systems should be managed, and where funding should go. That leads to even more federal and state taxpayer dollars being used to fix up what the Resnicks profit off of. This is all bad for California, even in a capitalistic sense. Agriculture uses 80% of California's water, but only represents 2% of its GDP. The Resnicks' water monopoly is just one way their quest for wealth hurts the rest of us. They allegedly lobby for increased tensions with Iran to keep embargoes on superior Iranian pistachios. Their giant crops lead to monocultures which kill important pollinators. They siphon taxpayer dollars into the company town charter schools they own, set up to train children to work for their farms. And of course, like any company of this size, they exploit their workers. We need to treat
Okay, but the GDP. Chat. No one is thinking about the GDP.
water for what it is.
These guys are patriots for keeping it up. Keeping it
A
up.
necessary public resource,
Making
a
sure
human
it's
right,
so high.
and something that shouldn't be owned by anyone, and work towards legislative change that stops people like the Resnicks from stealing it.
It's not stealing it if they're managing it better than the bureaucracy would. You know what I mean?